I don't know about you, but I love watching those shows where you have someone swoop in and just clear up all the clutter in your life, and the person ends up feeling so much better. Well, today I thought we could talk about how to clear the clutter in our minds. Hello, I'm Sandhya, and welcome to Dynamic Living. So today we're going to be talking about some good housekeeping for the mind. Or in other words, how to clear your mind up. Now, I'm not speaking of something that's a real disorder or a real disease that requires intervention. I'm just talking about those days when you feel like your head is a fog and everything's a mess and you just can't separate out your thoughts or understand what you're feeling, but there's like this overall feeling of pall and gloom in your head. That happens to me very often as well. And as I was thinking about how to get out of it, I remembered when I used to go and visit my grandmother in her last years. She was a very willful, very strong, very independent woman, and she lived in a beautiful house that she managed meticulously until the last few years of her life, that is. Slowly, clutter started building up, things started getting dirty, and she couldn't see it very well because her eyesight was failing her as well. But she did have that very, very independent streak in her still. So I would go visit her, and while she was asleep, I would scrub down the walls of her bathroom, clean the toilets, sweep the house, clear all the empty boxes out of her larder and the old newspapers and just spruce things up a little bit. And she'd wake up in the morning none the wiser, but she'd always say, "Sandhya, when you come, I feel like a breath of fresh air has come into this house." Now, that was a little wicked of me perhaps to not tell her. But how often have you heard that said about certain people? They come into our lives and, just seem to fix everything. So what if we were to be those people to ourselves? Here are a few tips for how to clear that clutter. This is an actual case of a young client of mine who was seeing a therapist for anxiety. Now, he came to me for certain other issues, but as we talked about or just sort of touched on the anxiety, I just asked him a few questions. I began by asking him, "Listen, what's your sleep like?" And it turns out that because there were some exams that he was preparing for, he simply wasn't sleeping enough because he had to wake up early each morning for his classes. As a result of that, he was also not eating his meals on time, often skipping breakfast and going well into the afternoon before he even realized that it was time for him to eat. Because there was also work from home happening, of course, and everything just merges one into the other. So here was a person who wasn't getting time for his brain to do any kind of housekeeping, which is what happens when we sleep. Here was somebody who wasn't nourishing his brain, nourishing his body with wholesome food. That is our fuel to operate. And without fuel, our body is going to constantly look for threats, constantly look for things that can harm us, constantly make us feel anxious, make us feel down. The next question I asked him was what kind of exercise he was getting. So he thought that he was getting an exercise, but when we actually drilled it down, he was barely getting in 20 minutes of movement every third day or so. And that cannot possibly offset hours of sitting, which in turn puts our body into a slouch frame of mind, which in turn reduces our breathing capacity because our lungs are almost collapsed on themselves. And without oxygen, we get tired. Our brain again starts to feel fatigued, in which case it's going to go into survival mode. Finally, there were a couple of other good housekeeping techniques that we discussed. One was to actually make time and spend that time with friends, having conversations that just lifted you. There's a saying that goes that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. Science has now shown that we actually do get impacted by the people that we spend time with. It's something called a body budget, and it isn't some sort of mystical energy that we get from somebody else or that we give out to other people. It's simply about how our mind feels like there's somebody else out here to balance things out with. Somebody out here who will sort of walk this path with me. And that already puts us in a state of less alertness, less looking out for threat, and in turn calms us down, and in turn uplifts our mood. And finally, this is something that you've been reading everywhere. Do not hesitate to ask for help. Now, a lot of us that feel very independent and otherwise competent in this world feel like it is somehow weak for us to reach out for help. But guess what? To the person whose help you're asking, that could actually make them feel amazing as well. Everybody likes to feel wanted and needed. And just for them to reach out could actually be doing them a favor. Think of it that way. But much more importantly, our survival is paramount. Our thriving is paramount, and we need to do what it takes for us to thrive, because unless we take care of ourselves, we are of no help to anyone in this world. I'll end by saying that there are a lot of things that are outside of our control, but this is a good time for us to remember the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I hope these good housekeeping tips have helped you. They certainly have helped me and several of my clients. If you think that this can help anybody else, feel free to share this video. Thank you for watching.